Beautiful building, beautiful gardens, and a beautiful evening with the evening sun here at Hurstmonceau. I'm joined now by Steve Charlton, and Steve, you're a falconer. Now that's you. Tell me about the bird first of all.
The bird, she's in fact an Indian tawny eagle, bred in captivity in the UK, and she's 11 years old, coming up for 11 years old now.
And what's her name?
Rani.
Now, Rani may well be familiar to some of our viewers.
She certainly is. About 9-10 months ago, whilst I was flying her, she got caught in some strong wind and was blown away, and they found her in Hailsham town, and the ITV actually covered it back then as well.
I remember it well. Now tell me, how does falconry kind of relate to medieval times?
Well, very, very much so. It is still the true sport of kings. We may think that horse racing is, but in fact it's always been falconry, and there was a distinct hierarchy in what you could own in the circles. And Knave had a kestrel, and then you went up to the Emperor King, he could fly the eagles, and obviously being the falconer, you can fly all of them.
It is quite a big attraction. We've seen some of the flying that's been taking place here already. Now, excuse the pun, but there really was a pecking order when it came to falconry back in medieval times.
There certainly was, and it was a big mistake to be caught outside that pecking order. So, for instance, if a knave was caught with a peregrine, the punishment was very, very serious indeed.
And do you get many people over the course of the next few days coming and having a go?
Yes, well, what will happen is they'll come and see the birds here. We've got 13 down here, from a merlin right up to the size of an eagle. Most of them are endemic birds, which you only find in the UK, so it keeps it all in tradition. And we'll be flying daily proper falconry with proper falcons, peregrine falcons, which are in fact the fastest living creatures on the planet. So we'll be flying a few of them during each display.
Well, Rani is a very impressive bird. Any tips on training birds?
Just patience, 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 and always make sure that the bird is happy.
That's what I think about you. Patience, patience, patience. Always make sure the bird is happy.
I was going to ask something sensible and say, what kind of a bird should a television presenter have? You know, what would be the Rolls Royce?
I would have thought perhaps a gerfalcon.
Right. Thank you, Steve.
Well, there we are. Brilliant. And Rani, I have to say we were a little bit nervous about how Rani would behave, but she's been impeccable. Thank you very much indeed. Well, we're going to be back here in Hurstmonceau a little bit later on. Gemma will be joining us, and of course she'll have the answer to the all-important question: what is the bank holiday weekend weather going to be like?
Now though, let's return to our newsroom for the rest of the day's news with Holly Lewis.
Thank you very much indeed, Holly. There is so much to do here over this weekend, and if you get thirsty, this is the place to go. What else could you call a place to eat and drink at a medieval festival than the Buxom Wench Tavern? And that, I'm afraid, is a perfect cue to go and find Gemma and find out exactly what the weekend weather has in store for the big bank holiday.
Now, I just knew that you would be sheltering in here because the weather has been hit and miss all day.
I thought you were going to say something rude about being a buxom wench, but I'm glad you didn't. The bar's in here as well as the food tent. And yes, I have been sheltering. We have had some showers today. Some places have actually got away with a mostly dry day. And looking ahead over the weekend, Saturday night is the only time that it looks as though we are going to get any kind of substantial rainfall. He has called you a buxom wench. I know.
And what have you been up to today?
Well, you know me, anywhere that horses are, I am.
John, you own most of the horses here this weekend. How many have you got?
That's correct. Here this weekend we've got about 18 from the yard of our own.
And how do you even begin to start training just a normal horse to joust, armed combat?
You need to have a horse that's reasonably educated and trained already. And then it's a good idea if you go and find somebody who has trained horses and knows what they're doing. But the rule of thumb with most horses is introduce them to things little bit by little bit.
Jeff, you've actually learnt to ride to be able to joust. How did that come about? What got you into it?
That's absolutely right. 8 years ago, my children persuaded me to come up here absolutely under sufferance, really didn't want to come. And eventually they persuaded me, wandered around here at Hurstmonceau, looking at everything going on, walked into the main arena and they just started to joust. And within 5 minutes, I turned to my wife and said, I'm going to do that. At that point she said, well, there's a slight problem that you can't ride and you don't have any armour. So over the course of the next 8 years, I've put together a complete harness of armour. We managed to track down John Dewdney at Ditchling Common Stud, who I think you've already met. And he taught me to ride from scratch. We've then learned to joust, and subsequently we've put together some riders from the Ditchling Common Stud, and we now are riding as Warhorse.
If anyone might be watching at home and think it's cruel, it's certainly not, is it?
No, the horses really, really love it. They really want to run. In fact, sometimes it's hard to stop them running. And to be honest, there's absolutely no way, you know, if you're not allowed to hit the horse under any circumstances, so they never actually get hit.
Gemma Humphreys feeling right at home there with the horses. And talking about feeling right at home, look at all this lovely food. It's gorgeous and I want to try lots of it. And I didn't know they had brownies in medieval times.
Absolutely lovely, and so much of the produce that's here is actually locally sourced as well, which is wonderful. Well, we saw Gemma there with the horses. That's not the only medieval sport here, as Charles Lambert now explains.
I'm at the back of the castle, behind those gardens we saw earlier. Now, being a bank holiday weekend, there's obviously a lot going on in the world of sport, in football and at the Olympics particularly. But I thought we can't come to a medieval festival without having a look at that classic medieval sport of archery. So I popped down there to find out how it all works. There was a time when Britain demonstrated the sort of dominance in the field of archery that it does today in the velodrome. Except that English preeminence in archery lasted more than a century, long enough for the English kings to wage the 100 Years' War in France. At medieval buildings like Hurstmonceux, archery shaped the architecture. Many say it shaped our society.
This is the thing that made England English, if you will. King Henry II, back in the 13th century, said that all men must arm themselves with weapons, and for the common man that meant the bow. And it was so much part of English life that stories like Robin Hood grew up. Robin Hood, of course, was an archer.
The kind of archery practiced by the Havoc display team is very different to the version we've seen in the Olympics. Take the target for a start.
This is Brian, our target dummy. I'm just going to sit him on his spike in a rather ungracious position.
Brian looks as though he's seen happier days.
Brian is very, very happy. There's Brian. It's very good protection against blows, against swords. We're going to demonstrate what sort of resistance it gives against war arrows.
Well, it's been nice meeting you, Brian. I think you're going to have a bit of a tough 2 or 3 days now, but yeah, he doesn't look happy, does he? After watching Glennon and Ian making it look straightforward, I ask if I can have a go.
That's your bow hand.
Right.
This is your drawing hand. That's it, now have a go.
That's about as far as I can get it. Ian Sturgis has been shooting for 2 years. You can see how his arms have developed to accommodate the bow.
My right arm is much stronger than my left. And you know what, it's going to make your shoulder much stronger.
It was the development of the cannon and then smaller firearms that brought an end to the age of the archer. Though it was later revived as a sport in Victorian times, the days when armies of archers would fire barrage upon barrage of arrows was over. Which was good news for Brian.
Well, the Middle Ages, of course, weren't all about knights in armour. It's about music as well, and a grand house like this at Hurstmonceux would have been visited by musicians like these quite often. Now, Anne, what's the name of your group?
Our group's called Trouvert.
And you're a Maidstone girl originally?
I am originally
a
Maidstone girl, yeah, coming back close to home.
And you're going to play for us a little bit later on?
We are, yeah.
So tell us, how unusual is medieval music, and are there many bands like you around?
We're not the only band of medieval minstrels around, certainly, but we're one of the bands who really put our research into the medieval music of the time. We investigate the surviving manuscripts and we stick as closely as we can to the instruments that would have been played at the time.
And what is a traditional medieval sound?
We certainly like our drones, so things like bagpipes and symphonies, which is a form of hurdy-gurdy, almost a mechanical violin.
And any mandolins?
Mandolins are a little bit later than the medieval period, but certainly you do have ancestors of the guitar.
Thank you. Well, I look forward to hearing you, because there's always this expectation, isn't it, that it's sounding a bit old-worldy.
Yeah, Gemma's with us now. And Gemma, the place has been ringing to the sound of medieval music all day, hasn't it?
It has. It's been fabulous being here, and certainly it looks like it's going to be a good weather weekend as well. What more can you ask for?
Yeah, well, thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to be at the Hop Festival, aren't we?
In Maidstone, that's right. Have a great weekend, and we'll play you out with music from Trouvert.
Have a lovely bank holiday weekend from all of us on the team. Bye-bye.